Okie dokie. Now let's finish this chapter about the beginning of agriculture. Okay, let me go to the, here it is, here it is, here it is. Let me move this, over here. You only pay attention, guys. You can't turn off your camera. Only pay attention to the video, okay, guys? Agriculture, actually. Let me begin here. The plants.
Plants. After a warming trend brought an end to the ice ages, new plants began to grow in some areas. For example, wild barley and wheat plants started to spread throughout Southwest Asia. Over time, people came to depend on these wild plants for food. They began to settle where grains grew. People soon learned that they could plant seeds themselves to grow their own crops. Historians call the shift from food gathering to food producing the Neolithic Revolution. Most experts believe that this revolution, or change, first occurred in the societies of Southwest Asia.
Gordon, can you hear it? Okay, good. Okay, let's move on. Let's go over here. Agriculture in Southwest Asia.
Eventually, people learned to change plants to make them more useful through a process called domestication. They planted only the largest grains or the sweetest fruits. The domestication of plants led to the development of agriculture or farming. For the first time, people could produce their own food. This development changed human society forever. Early domestication.
Now over here there is a question. It says, where was rice domesticated? Okay, let's watch this map. And where is the rice domesticated? It's over here. This is Asia, and it's over here. Now I'm gonna ask you a question over here, guys. Which one is the answer? Number 1, 2, 3, or 4? Tell me. Anybody?
Where?
Which one is the answer? Number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4? Which one?
Teacher, Southeast Asia is where is Japan, right?
No.
Europe.
No, over here. This is.
I think it's the first.
Japan is here. Remember. North, south, east, and west.
Yeah.
North, south, east, and over here is Japan. Japan is over here. And they're talking about the rice. And over here it says rice. So which one is the answer?
South Asia.
This one?
South.
You think so?
East.
South.
Let's see.
Asia.
Incorrect. What's
Asia.
domesticated in southeast? Over here, this one, southeast.
Lo sabía. Lo dije.
Yeah.
No.
Let's continue, guys. Let's continue.
Scholars remain uncertain about what led early people to undertake domestication. Humans may have chosen certain plants because of favorable characteristics, but not all plants that were domesticated seem to have been obvious choices.
Okay, over here, let's move on to this one. This is the next.
Main idea. Farming changed societies and the way people lived. Farming changes societies. The Neolithic Revolution brought huge changes to people's lives. With survival more certain, people could focus on activities other than finding food. Domestication of plants and animals enabled people to use plant fibers to make cloth. The domestication of animals made it possible to use wool from goats and sheep and skins from horses for clothes. After the Neolithic Revolution, people used animals to help them farm the land. People also began to build permanent settlements. As they started raising crops and animals, they needed to stay in one place instead of continuing to travel in search of new food sources. Then, once people were able to control their own food production, the world's population grew. In some areas, farming communities developed into towns. Early economies. Two examples of Neolithic communities are Çatalhöyük in modern-day Turkey and Jericho near the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. These towns had traditional economies. In a traditional economy, people make economic decisions based on customs and beliefs passed down from generation to generation. These decisions may include which crops to plant and how they should be distributed.
Hold on, guys. Okay, this is the village of Çatalhöyük. Pay attention, this is it.
An early farming society. The village of Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey is one of the earliest farming villages discovered. Around 8,000 years ago, the village was home to about 5,000 to 6,000 people, living in more than 1,000 houses. Villagers farmed, hunted and fished, traded with distant lands, and worshipped gods in special shrines.
Okay, let's move on.
In Neolithic communities like Çatalhöyük and Jericho, people used primitive tools and methods to grow, harvest, and hunt sources of food. They created large pits for storage of food. This meant that farmers could increase their productivity by harvesting large amounts of food and storing it after harvest. Having a surplus or an extra amount made trade possible, since farmers had a supply of food that others might want to purchase or gain through barter. A barter system is a form of exchange where goods and services are traded for other goods and services. The people who lived in Jericho, for example, traded items like salt and grain for turquoise gems from the Sinai region. Religious practices. As populations of towns grew, groups of people gathered to perform religious ceremonies. Some put up megaliths. Megaliths are used as monuments or as the sites for religious gatherings. Stonehenge is a prehistoric site located in England that dates to 3000 to 1520 BC. Scientists, historians, and archaeologists have long disagreed about the exact purpose of Stonehenge. Some argue that it was a megalith that served as a monument to the dead, while others claim that it served a religious purpose. Yet others believe it helped ancient peoples predict astronomical changes, such as lunar eclipses. Early people probably believed in gods and goddesses associated with the four elements: air, water, fire, and earth, or with animals. For example, one early European group honored a thunder god, while another group worshipped bulls. Some scholars also believe that many prehistoric peoples prayed to their ancestors. People in some societies today still hold many of these same beliefs. Many communities and religions have practices and structures that guide what happens when a person dies. At Çatalhöyük, for example, flesh was removed from the body, and the bones were then bleached and buried in the floors of homes.
Now this is a video about the same talk. I want you to watch it, okay? Let's watch it.
When in our evolution did we first realize that all must die, and that death might not be the end? The earliest clues are prehistoric. Tens of thousands of years ago, before we learned to farm or write, we buried our dead with ritual.
We don't know the very earliest earth burials, but there are certainly some earth burials that go back at least 40 or 44,000 years, and more recently archaeologists have found some that go back much beyond that.
Despite the enormous gulf of time, archaeologists have found clear signs of concerns much like our own.
They must have had a reverence and a respect for the dead because fossilized remains of plants and leaves and moss remain in these graves, suggesting that they made some provision so that the graves would be comfortable.
Okay, this is the end of the video. Basically, this is farming. Yeah, okay, no, I think we have more, another video over here. Let me see, where is it? Next page. Oh, no, that was it, okay. Anyway, I also brought this video about this megalith that is in England, okay? Let's watch this. As they say, they really don't know what they create this structure. Maybe for a religious ceremony or maybe for another objective. So they the scholars they don't know really what was the purpose of this structure. Okay. All of these structures are in England. Look all these stones over here. This one. Devil's Den Stone. Devils. That's El Diablo. This is the white horse. Look, it's like a horse. The giant, it's like a giant. Silvery Hill. Okay, this is the video. With this video, we finish the beginning of agriculture. As you see, there were a lot of changes after people start creating their where the agriculture began. They settle in a specific place and they start creating big communities. Okay, because they stay and they remain in one place. Okay. Now next week we are going to talk about another topic. That topic is on page 66. 66. The name of the topic is Geography of the Fertile Crescent. Geography of the Fertile Crescent. Okay? And it's about the Mesopotamia. And over there, remember, you have to write the title and then the vocabulary, and the vocabulary is is in the same page. It's in the same page. There are 7 words. Fertile Crescent, silt, civilization, irrigation, canals, surplus, division of labor. That is on page 66. As I said, Geography of the Fertile Crescent. Okay. Now, as an introduction, guys, I'm gonna play a video that talks about the topic that we're going to focus next week. Let me play this one. No, this one. Yes, it's 2 minutes. This one, 4 minutes.
The story of writing, astronomy, and law. The story of civilization itself begins in one place. Not Egypt, not Greece, not Rome, but Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is an exceedingly fertile plain situated between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. For 5 millennia, this small strip of land situated in what is today Iraq, Kuwait, and Syria fostered innovations that would change the world forever. Inhabited for nearly 12,000 years, Mesopotamia's stable climate, rich soil, and steady supply of fresh water made it ideal for agriculture to develop and thrive. About 6,000 years ago, seemingly overnight.
Now keep in mind, guys, this is one of the first civilizations in the world, one of the first great civilizations in the world, and they developed between these 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, okay?
Overnight, some of these agricultural settlements blossomed into some of the world's first cities. In the period between 4000 and 3100 BC, Mesopotamia was dotted with a constellation of competing city-states. At one point, they were unified under the Akkadian Empire and then broke apart, forming the empires of Assyria and Babylon. Despite near constant warfare, innovation and development thrived in ancient Mesopotamia. They built on a monumental scale, from palaces to ziggurats. Mammoth temples served as ritual locations to commune with the gods. They also developed advanced mathematics, including a base 60 system that created a 60-second minute, a 60-minute hour, and a 360-degree circular angle. The Babylonians used their sophisticated system of mathematics to map and study the sky. They divided one Earth year into 12 periods. Each was named after the most prominent constellations in the heavens, a tradition later adopted by the Greeks to create the zodiac. They also divided the week into 7 days, naming each after their 7 gods, embodied by the 7 observable planets in the sky. But perhaps the most impactful innovation to come out of Mesopotamia is literacy. What began as simple pictures scrawled onto wet clay to keep track of goods and wealth developed into a sophisticated writing system by the year 3200 BC. This writing system would come to be called cuneiform in modern times and proved so flexible that, over the span of 3,000 years, it would be adapted for over a dozen different major languages and countless uses, including recording the law of the Babylonian king Hammurabi, which formed the basis of a standardized justice system. But Mesopotamia's success became its undoing. Babylon, in particular, proved too rich a state to resist outside envy. In 539 BC, the Persian king Cyrus conquered Babylon and sealed his control over the entirety of Mesopotamia.
Stop right here. I think I have another one. Let me see.
The first civilizations began on a wide, flat plain between 2 great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. These rivers flow from the mountains in present-day Turkey to the Persian Gulf. In ancient times, this area was called Mesopotamia. The name Mesopotamia comes from a Greek word that means land between the rivers. Mesopotamia is part of a larger region called the Fertile Crescent. This land stretches from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. The Fertile Crescent is where the first farming communities were developed. According to many scholars, a group of people known as Sumerians migrated to Mesopotamia thousands of years ago.
Okay, let's stop right here and let's go back because we have like 2 minutes left. My God, Barbara, come on. Okay, please, everybody, please, your camera on, your camera on. Turn on your camera, everybody. Turn on your camera, guys. Please, 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 please. Remember, you have to wear your uniform or at least clothing that is close to the color of the uniform, guys. So please wear your uniform during the classes. Now, I'm going to ask the question, what is the meaning of Mesopotamia? Who knows? What is the meaning of Mesopotamia? You just watched the video. Who knows? I'm going to give you 5 points for the next test. Going once.
Like a connection or something like that.
A what?
Like a connection of land or something like that.
No, no, that is not. Who knows? Gordon, do you know?
A kingdom that was too rich for the navy.
No, 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 no. What is the meaning of the word Mesopotamia? Going once? Going twice?
Teacher.
3. Okay. What is the meaning of Mesopotamia? Mesopotamia means between rivers. Between rivers. That is the meaning of the word Mesopotamia. Between rivers. And what is the river? The Tigris and the Euphrates. This civilization, they developed between these, in this area, called the river, 2 big rivers. Excuse me?
In